A flat tire, a boy, and a changed life. The scorching Kentucky sun blazed down as Matthew Evans sat in his sleek silver Mercedes, tapping his thumb impatiently against the steering wheel. The hum of the air conditioner fought a losing battle against the oppressive heat. At 76, Matthew had built a life most could only dream of. Retired and wealthy from a successful career in finance, he was accustomed to control and convenience. But today, stranded on a dusty country road with a flat tire, far from the comfort of his sprawling estate, he felt powerless. Repeated attempts to call for roadside assistance yielded nothing but frustration. As a tinge of irritation bubbled within him, Matthew noticed a figure approaching in the distance. A boy, perhaps 13 or 14, wearing a faded t-shirt and scuffed sneakers, walked with purposeful strides. The boy's confident demeanor caught Matthew off guard. "Got a flat, sir?" the boy asked, his voice steady, tinged with genuine concern. Matthew nodded, relieved yet skeptical. "Yes, I do. I tried calling for help, but no luck." "I can help with that," the boy replied without hesitation, kneeling beside the car. "My grandpa taught me how to change a tire last summer. Got a spare?" Matthew pointed to the trunk, watching as the boy fetched the tools and got to work. His hands moved with a quiet confidence, his focus unwavering. For a moment, Matthew was struck by the boy's calm resolve, a stark contrast to his own rising impatience earlier. In a matter of minutes, the boy finished. Standing up, he wiped his hands on his jeans and offered a small, satisfied smile. "All done, sir." Matthew reached into his wallet, pulling out a few crisp bills. "Here, take this. I really appreciate your help." The boy stepped back, raising his hand politely. "Thank you, sir, but I don't need anything. Just happy to help." Before Matthew could respond, the boy turned and walked away down the road, his silhouette growing smaller in the rearview mirror. The interaction left Matthew shaken, though he couldn't pinpoint why. Alone in his car, the boy's words lingered in his mind. Just happy to help. That evening, Matthew sat in the leather armchair of his expansive study, surrounded by shelves of untouched books. A perfectly cooked steak and asparagus sat untouched on the side table. The boy's image played on a loop in his mind. His calm demeanor, his worn clothes, and that dignified smile. Matthew had spent decades in the cutthroat world of finance, where every interaction had a price and every gesture came with strings attached. But this boy, this stranger, had extended a hand of kindness without expecting anything in return. The realization unsettled him. The next morning, an inexplicable urge pulled Matthew back to that dusty road. He drove for hours, stopping at gas stations and diners, describing the boy to anyone who would listen. His persistence paid off when a kind cafe owner spoke up. "Sounds like you're talking about Elijah," she said. "That boy's always helping folks around here. Lives with his mama over in Harlan." Harlan. The name stirred something in Matthew, a distant memory of his own modest beginnings. Thanking the woman, he set off for the small town nestled in the Appalachian foothills. Harlan was quiet, its streets lined with weathered homes and small businesses. After asking around, Matthew was directed to a modest house on the edge of town. The home was simple but tidy, its porch sagging slightly under its own weight. Taking a deep breath, Matthew knocked on the door. A woman in her early 40s answered, her tired eyes softening as Matthew explained his visit. "That sounds like my Elijah," she said with pride. "He's always looking out for others. He's out back if you'd like to see him." Matthew followed her to the yard, where Elijah was repairing a sagging fence. The boy looked up, surprised but unbothered by the sight of the older man. "Hey, mister," Elijah greeted with an easy smile. "What brings you here?" "I wanted to thank you properly," Matthew said. "You helped me when I really needed it, and I couldn't stop thinking about it." Elijah shrugged, his expression earnest. "It wasn't a big deal." "It was to me," Matthew replied. "People don't usually help strangers without expecting something in return." Elijah tilted his head, puzzled. Why not? If someone needs help and I can do it, why wouldn't I? The simplicity of the boy's logic struck Matthew. He looked around the yard. The mismatched fence, the rusted swing set, the sparse grass, and realized that while Elijah's family had little, they lived with a richness that money couldn't buy. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," Matthew said, meaning every word. "Your mother must be proud." "She works hard," Elijah replied, glancing toward the house. "I just try to help where I can." After sharing a humble but warm meal with Elijah and his mother, Matthew drove home, his heart heavier yet lighter all at once. His opulent estate felt hollow in comparison to the vibrant warmth of their home. For the first time in years, he felt compelled to give, not out of obligation or guilt, but from a genuine desire to honor the kindness he'd received. Matthew decided to set up a trust for Elijah's future, ensuring the boy could pursue his dream of becoming an engineer. He also reached out to community organizations to improve conditions in Elijah's neighborhood, funding repairs and resources for families like his. But it wasn't just about money. Matthew began volunteering in Harlan, using his expertise to mentor young people in the area. He found purpose in the very values he had once set aside: humility, gratitude, and the power of helping others without expecting anything in return. Months later, as Matthew stood on that same dusty road, watching Elijah ride his bike, he felt a profound sense of peace. The boy had given him more than just help with a flat tire. He had reignited Matthew's faith in humanity and reminded him of the wealth found in connection, kindness, and integrity. Sometimes it takes a flat tire and a young boy with a generous heart to change a life forever. A restless night and a fateful decision. That evening, as the sky outside his mansion darkened, Matthew Evans sat alone in his grand study, surrounded by silent reminders of his success. The room, with its towering shelves filled with leather-bound books, bespoke furniture, and expensive art pieces, exuded wealth. But tonight, it felt suffocating. The soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner seemed louder than ever, each second stretching endlessly. On the desk before him, a half-empty glass of scotch caught the flickering light of the desk lamp. His dinner, a perfectly cooked filet mignon accompanied by roasted asparagus, remained untouched on a silver tray nearby. Matthew wasn't hungry. His mind was elsewhere, replaying the brief encounter with the boy on the side of the road. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just the boy's act of kindness that lingered. It was the way he carried himself. There had been no hesitation in Elijah's actions, no expectation of a reward. His worn clothes and humble demeanor told a story of struggle, yet his confident smile spoke of something far greater than material wealth. It spoke of character, of values deeply ingrained. For all his years of building wealth and influence, Matthew couldn't recall the last time he'd felt so moved by a single interaction. He thought about the people he'd encountered over the decades: business partners, employees, and acquaintances. Nearly every relationship he had built was transactional, driven by the pursuit of profit or mutual benefit. But Elijah had asked for nothing. The thought made Matthew uncomfortable. It gnawed at him, forcing him to confront questions he had long buried. When had I last done something purely out of kindness? When did I stop believing in giving without expecting anything in return? The old man rose from his chair and walked to the window, gazing out at the sprawling grounds of his estate. The meticulously maintained gardens, the shimmering pool, the distant silhouette of the guest house. It was all a testament to his success. Yet, for the first time, it felt empty. What good was it all if it lacked connection, purpose, and meaning? As the hours ticked by, Matthew found himself unable to sleep. Tossing and turning in his luxurious bed, he stared at the ceiling, haunted by the image of Elijah walking away down that dusty road. He didn't fully understand why, but he knew he couldn't let the moment pass without doing something more. Something bigger. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, Matthew had made up his mind. He would find Elijah. Not to pay him back, but to learn more about the boy who had unknowingly reignited a spark of humanity in his heart. A journey of discovery. Matthew set out early that morning, his silver Mercedes gliding down the quiet country road where he'd first met Elijah. The Kentucky countryside, with its rolling hills and open fields, passed by in a blur as his mind raced with anticipation. He stopped at every gas station, diner, and small shop along the way, describing Elijah to anyone who would listen. Most shrugged or offered polite apologies, but Matthew pressed on, undeterred. Hours passed before he finally struck gold at a small cafe. The woman behind the counter, an older lady with kind eyes and a warm smile, paused mid-wipe of a coffee mug when Matthew described Elijah. "You're talking about Elijah, aren't you?" she asked, a knowing glint in her eye. Matthew leaned forward eagerly. "Yes, that's him. Do you know where I can find him?" The woman nodded. "That boy's always helping folks. Lives with his mama over in Harlan. Good family. Hardworking." Harlan, Matthew repeated, committing the name to memory. He thanked the woman and left the cafe, his determination renewed. The drive to Harlan was picturesque, the town nestled in the foothills of the Appalachians, but Matthew barely noticed the scenery. His thoughts were consumed by questions. What kind of life did Elijah lead? What circumstances had shaped a boy so young into someone so selfless? When Matthew arrived in Harlan, the small town felt like a world apart from his own life. The streets were lined with modest homes, their paint chipped and their porches weathered by time. Small businesses stood proudly, their signs hand-painted and inviting. It was a far cry from the polished, fast-paced environment Matthew was used to, but it held a charm he couldn't deny. After asking a few locals, he was directed to a small house on the outskirts of town. The house was modest, its faded exterior hinting at years of wear. But it was tidy, with flower pots lining the porch and a neatly trimmed yard. Matthew parked his car and approached the house, suddenly nervous. What would he say? Would they even want to hear from him? Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door. Moments later, it opened to reveal a woman in her early 40s. She looked tired but kind, her sharp eyes studying him with quiet curiosity. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone cautious but polite. Matthew cleared his throat. "Good morning. My name is Matthew Evans. I believe I met your son yesterday. Elijah, right? He helped me with a flat tire." Her expression softened, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "That sounds like my Elijah. He's always helping folks." She stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Come on in. He's out back, fixing the fence." Matthew stepped inside, taking in the humble surroundings. The furniture was worn but clean, the walls adorned with family photos and hand-drawn pictures that seemed to tell a story of love and resilience. The space felt lived in, vibrant with the kind of warmth that money couldn't buy. He followed Elijah's mother to the backyard, where the boy was hard at work repairing a sagging fence. When Elijah looked up and saw Matthew, his face broke into a surprised grin. "Hey, mister," he called out, wiping his hands on his jeans. "What are you doing here?" Matthew smiled, feeling an odd mix of nerves and admiration. "I came to thank you properly. You helped me when I really needed it, and I couldn't stop thinking about it." Elijah shrugged, his expression easy and genuine. "It wasn't a big deal." "It was to me," Matthew replied, his voice earnest. "You don't see kindness like that every day." Matthew spent the rest of the afternoon with Elijah and his family, sharing stories and learning more about their lives. By the time he left, he wasn't just grateful for the boy's help. He was inspired by the strength, humility, and kindness that defined their small household. Elijah had given Matthew far more than a fixed tire. He had reminded him of the power of compassion and the wealth found in connection. What Matthew decided to do next would transform not only Elijah's life, but his own, setting him on a path toward rediscovering the true meaning of success. A seed of change. The drive back to his estate was quiet, yet Matthew's mind was anything but. The hum of the tires on the asphalt seemed to echo the rhythm of his thoughts, which turned over and over like the pages of a book he couldn't put down. His visit to Harlan had left him with more questions than answers, not about Elijah or his family, but about himself. For decades, Matthew had measured his success in numbers, balance sheets, investment portfolios, and profit margins. Every decision he made had been calculated, every action aligned with his ambitions. Yet, for all his wealth and accomplishments, he couldn't shake the feeling that something vital had been missing. It wasn't just Elijah's kindness that stayed with him. It was the simplicity of the boy's life. Elijah didn't have much, but he carried himself with a quiet dignity that spoke of riches far beyond material possessions. Matthew thought about the boy's patched-up yard, his mother's gentle resilience, and the warmth of their modest home. There was no extravagance, no luxury, yet there was something else, a sense of purpose, of genuine connection, that Matthew realized he had long since lost. By the time he pulled into the driveway of his sprawling mansion, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson. The estate, with its meticulously manicured gardens and imposing architecture, now felt hollow. It was a monument to a life built on ambition, but it lacked the very thing Elijah's home had in abundance: art. Matthew stepped out of the car and paused, taking in the grandeur that surrounded him. For the first time, he didn't feel pride. Instead, he felt a gnawing sense of regret. What good was all of this if it served no purpose beyond himself? The question weighed heavily on him as he entered his home, the silence inside amplifying his thoughts. He wandered into his study and sank into the leather armchair, staring blankly at the collection of books that lined the walls. Most of them had never been read. They were decorations, props in the performance of his success. His gaze shifted to the mahogany desk, where photos of distant family members sat in polished silver frames. The smiles captured in those pictures felt unfamiliar, as though they belonged to strangers. For years, Matthew had convinced himself that his relentless pursuit of wealth was for them, his family, his legacy. But as he sat there, the truth settled in his chest like a heavy stone. When had he last called his niece, sent a letter to his sister, invited anyone into this grand house to share a meal? He thought again of Elijah, of the boy's easy smile and unassuming nature. Elijah hadn't just helped him with a flat tire. He'd held up a mirror, forcing Matthew to see himself in a way he hadn't in years. The reflection wasn't flattering, but it was honest. That night, Matthew made a decision. For years, he had amassed wealth, power, and influence. Now it was time to use it for something greater than himself. Building bridges, not walls. The next morning, Matthew sat at his desk, a blank sheet of paper before him. He wasn't sure where to begin, but he knew he had to start somewhere. With slow, deliberate strokes, he began to write. Dear Elijah, I wanted to thank you once again for your kindness on the side of the road. What you did may have seemed small to you, but it was monumental to me. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten: the power of simple, selfless acts. I believe in people like you, Elijah. People who see the world not as a collection of transactions, but as a community where we all have a role to play in lifting each other up. You've inspired me to be better, to do better. With that in mind, I'd like to help you achieve your dreams. I've set up a fund for your education, so when the time comes for you to pursue your goal of becoming an engineer, you'll have the resources to make it happen. He paused, his pen hovering above the paper. There was more he wanted to say, but he wasn't sure how to put it into words. After a moment, he continued. This isn't just about giving back. It's about honoring the values you and your family embody: kindness, integrity, and hard work. Your actions have set a ripple in motion, and I want to make sure that ripple spreads as far as it can. Thank you, Elijah. You've changed my life in ways I can't fully explain. With gratitude, Matthew Evans. From ripples to waves. But Matthew didn't stop there. Over the following weeks, he worked tirelessly to turn his newfound clarity into action. He reached out to community organizations in Harlan, offering to fund programs that would provide better opportunities for families like Elijah's. He sponsored scholarships for local students, ensuring that no dream was out of reach because of financial hardship. He also made a point to visit Harlan regularly, volunteering his time and sharing his knowledge. Matthew became a mentor to young people in the community, teaching them the skills he had honed over decades in finance. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, connected to a purpose greater than himself. The transformation wasn't easy. Matthew faced skepticism from some who questioned his motives, and even from himself, as he grappled with the weight of his past choices. But each time doubt crept in, he thought of Elijah, of the boy's unshakable integrity, and the lesson he had imparted without ever realizing it. A life reimagined. Months later, as Matthew stood on the porch of Elijah's home, watching the boy tinker with a new bike, a gift from one of the programs Matthew had funded, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The laughter of children playing nearby, the warmth of the autumn sun on his face, the gratitude in Elijah's mother's smile, all of it filled him with a joy that no amount of money could buy. "Thank you, Mr. Evans," Elijah said, looking up from the bike. His smile was the same, genuine, unassuming, and full of heart. Matthew shook his head, his own smile softening. "No, Elijah. Thank you. You've given me far more than I could ever give you." And in that moment, Matthew Evans, the man who had spent a lifetime building wealth, understood what it truly meant to be rich. A legacy redefined. The seasons shifted, and with them, so did Matthew's world. Where once his life had been governed by rigid schedules and bottom-line thinking, it now flowed with a new rhythm, one guided by purpose, connection, and a sense of giving that filled the void he had once ignored. The spark ignited by a young boy's act of kindness had grown into a flame, and Matthew was determined to let it burn brightly. His estate, once a sanctuary of solitude and excess, had become a hub of activity. On any given day, the grand halls and sprawling gardens were alive with the chatter of children and the laughter of families from Harlan. Matthew had opened his doors, not just to Elijah and his family, but to the wider community. His wealth was no longer a fortress, it was a bridge. Rebuilding Harlan, one dream at a time. In the months following his first visit to Harlan, Matthew poured his resources into the small town, but not in a way that felt intrusive or patronizing. He worked closely with community leaders, listening more than he spoke. What did they need? What were their dreams? How could his resources empower them, not overshadow them? The answers came in small, deliberate steps. A neglected community center was renovated and transformed into a thriving hub for after-school programs, skill-building workshops, and local gatherings. Scholarships were established, not just for college-bound students, but also for trade school and vocational training. Options Matthew knew were just as valuable, if not more so, in places like Harlan. Elijah's mother, who had always carried the weight of their family on her shoulders with quiet grace, received training to open her own small business. It was a modest cafe, serving coffee, home-baked goods, and the kind of warmth that only comes from a person who has lived through hard times and come out stronger. Matthew didn't just fund these efforts. He was there, boots on the ground, working alongside the people he had once viewed from a distance. He helped paint walls, plant gardens, and mentor young entrepreneurs. He wasn't the wealthy benefactor who stood apart. He was part of their story. Elijah's growing world. As Harlan began to flourish, so too did Elijah. With the scholarship Matthew had established, the boy had access to opportunities he had only dreamed of before. Weekends were spent at a nearby university, where he attended workshops on engineering and robotics. His natural curiosity and sharp mind blossomed in this new environment, and it wasn't long before professors and mentors began to take notice. But Elijah remained grounded. Each day, he returned home with the same humble demeanor that had first struck Matthew. He used his newfound knowledge to improve not just his own life, but the lives of those around him. He designed a water filtration system for a local creek, ensuring cleaner water for the community. He helped neighbors repair their homes using techniques he learned in his classes, and he never stopped helping strangers, just as he had helped Matthew that fateful day. One afternoon, Matthew and Elijah sat on the porch of the Evans estate, sipping lemonade and watching the sun dip below the horizon. "You've come a long way, Elijah," Matthew said, a note of pride in his voice. Elijah shrugged, a modest grin spreading across his face. "I've just been doing what I can. Like I said, if someone needs help and I can do it, why wouldn't I?" Matthew chuckled, shaking his head. "You've got a wisdom about you that most people take a lifetime to learn." Elijah glanced at him, his gaze steady. "You taught me something too, you know. It's not about how much you have. It's about how you use it." The words hung in the air, sinking deep into Matthew's heart. In that moment, he realized that the boy he had set out to help had become one of his greatest teachers, a monument to kindness. As the years passed, the changes Matthew had helped set in motion continued to ripple outward. Harlan transformed from a struggling town into a beacon of resilience and community. New businesses flourished, schools thrived, and the people who had once felt forgotten now had a sense of pride and possibility. Matthew, now in his late 70s, found himself surrounded by a legacy far richer than the one he had originally envisioned. His name wasn't etched into corporate buildings or commemorated in exclusive circles of wealth. It was spoken in the laughter of children playing in the park he had helped build, in the stories shared over coffee at Elijah's mother's cafe, and in the lives touched by his willingness to give. One day, Elijah came to him with a proposal. "I want to start a program," he said, his eyes alight with passion. "A mentorship for kids who dream big, but don't have the resources to get there. Just like you helped me." Matthew smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Let's do it together." And so they did. The program, aptly named Bridges, became a cornerstone of Harlan's community. It connected young dreamers with mentors, resources, and opportunities, ensuring that no talent went unnoticed, no dream unattainable. A final reflection. On a crisp autumn evening, Matthew stood on a hill overlooking the town of Harlan. The lights below twinkled like stars, each one representing a life, a story, a connection. He thought back to the man he had been before that flat tire, so focused on his own success that he had forgotten the simple beauty of giving. Elijah's voice echoed in his mind. "If someone needs help and I can do it, why wouldn't I?" The question had reshaped his entire life. It had taken him from a man of wealth to a man of purpose, from an individual defined by his possessions to one remembered for his compassion. Matthew smiled, a deep contentment settling over him. He had found his true legacy, not in the things he had built, but in the lives he had touched. And it all began with a young boy, a dusty road, and an act of kindness that changed everything. The ripple effect. Years passed, and Matthew Evans found himself a revered figure in the town of Harlan. Not because of his wealth or his generosity, but because of the spirit of collaboration and growth he had helped ignite. The man who once measured life in zeros and commas now measured it in lives transformed and futures reshaped. But this story wasn't just about Matthew. It was about what happens when one act of kindness becomes the seed for something far greater, a ripple that grows into waves. Elijah's future takes flight. Elijah graduated high school at the top of his class, his achievements not just academic but deeply rooted in his unwavering character. With the scholarship Matthew had established for him, he was admitted to one of the nation's leading engineering programs. It was a moment of celebration for the entire town. Elijah's success was their success, a testament to the power of a community that believed in its own. Despite the prestige of his education, Elijah never let go of his roots. During his summer breaks, he returned to Harlan to mentor younger students, sharing stories of his journey and encouraging them to dream big. His favorite saying became a mantra in the town: "Dreams are free, but they take work, and we're in this together." When he completed his degree, Elijah faced a decision that many young people from small towns confront: stay close to home or venture into the wider world. His professors encouraged him to pursue high-paying jobs in the city, but Elijah's heart remained tied to Harlan. He wanted to bring his knowledge back to the place that had shaped him, the bridge builder. Elijah returned to Harlan, but not as the same boy who had fixed Matthew's flat tire years ago. He came back as an engineer with a vision. His first project was ambitious, designing and overseeing the construction of a state-of-the-art community center that doubled as a learning hub. The center featured a library, technology labs, and spaces for vocational training, all aimed at empowering Harlan's residents to pursue their ambitions. Matthew stood by Elijah's side as the center was unveiled to the public, the crowd erupting in applause as Elijah cut the ribbon. Watching the young man beam with pride, Matthew felt a lump rise in his throat. This wasn't just a building. It was a bridge to the future. "Elijah," Matthew said quietly as they stood together on the center steps, "this is just the beginning." Elijah turned to him, his eyes bright with determination. "It's our beginning," he replied. Matthew's final years. As Matthew entered his twilight years, his visits to Harlan became less frequent. Age slowed him down, but his impact remained a constant presence. Every initiative he had started, every investment he had made, was now self-sustaining, carried forward by the very people he had sought to empower. From his home, Matthew kept in close contact with Elijah, who often sent him updates about the town's progress. Photos of students graduating from the mentorship program, stories of families thriving in the revitalized community, and videos of the bustling marketplace, filled with laughter and music. All of it reminded Matthew that his wealth had finally found its purpose. But Matthew wasn't content to rest on his laurels. He spent his final years documenting the lessons he had learned, crafting a memoir titled "The Value of Giving." In it, he shared the story of his transformation, crediting Elijah and the town of Harlan for teaching him the true meaning of wealth. The book became a bestseller, with all proceeds going to support education and community building initiatives in rural towns across the country. A farewell and a celebration. When Matthew passed away at the age of 84, his death was not met with mourning alone. It was met with celebration. Harlan, along with countless other communities he had touched, came together to honor his life and legacy. A memorial service was held in the very community center Elijah had built, the walls adorned with photos capturing Matthew's journey from a man of privilege to a man of purpose. Elijah, now in his 30s and a leader in his own right, stood before the crowd to deliver a eulogy. His voice was steady, but his words carried the weight of profound gratitude. Matthew Evans was many things: a businessman, a mentor, a philanthropist. But to me, he was a friend, a man who reminded us all that it's never too late to change, to grow, to give. His kindness started with a flat tire, but it didn't stop there. He taught us that the smallest acts of generosity can ripple outward and change the world. And for that, we will always be grateful. As Elijah spoke, Matthew's lessons echoed in the hearts of everyone present. The seeds he had sown had flourished into a forest of hope, resilience, and opportunity. The legacy lives on. Years after Matthew's passing, his legacy continued to inspire. The mentorship program he and Elijah had founded expanded to neighboring towns, creating a network of support for rural communities. The community center in Harlan became a model for others across the country, a shining example of what could be achieved when resources met purpose. Elijah, now a father himself, often told his children the story of the flat tire that changed everything. He wanted them to understand the importance of humility, compassion, and the simple but profound truth that one act of kindness can change the world. And in Harlan, where it all began, a plaque stood in the town square. It bore an inscription that encapsulated the spirit of Matthew Evans and the boy who had inspired him. In every act of kindness lies the power to transform a life, and in every transformed life lies the power to transform the world. The ripple had become a wave, and the wave a legacy. The next generation of kindness. The town of Harlan had become a symbol of resilience and hope, a place where stories of transformation inspired others to believe in the power of possibility. But as much as Harlan celebrated its progress, the real legacy of Matthew Evans and Elijah lay not in the buildings or programs they had established, but in the people they had touched, and the lessons those people carried forward. Among those people was a young girl named Ava Carter. At 12 years old, Ava was bright and curious, with an unshakable sense of wonder about the world. She lived in Harlan, attending the very community center Elijah had built years ago. Ava's mother worked 2 jobs to keep their small household running, and while money was tight, Ava's spirit remained undimmed. The community center was Ava's favorite place. Its shelves of books fed her love for reading, and the technology lab allowed her to explore her fascination with science. Most afternoons, she could be found tinkering with small robots, inspired by the stories she'd heard about Elijah's journey to becoming an engineer. Elijah, who still visited the center regularly, had taken notice of Ava's curiosity and determination. One afternoon, as Ava worked intently on a small circuit board, Elijah approached her, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Looks like you've got a knack for this," he said, crouching beside her. Ava looked up, startled at first, then beamed. "I love figuring out how things work," she said. "I want to build something that helps people someday." Elijah nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "You remind me of someone I used to know." "Who?" Ava asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Elijah leaned back, crossing his arms. "A man named Matthew Evans. He once told me that the best things we build in life aren't just for ourselves. They're for others." Ava's spark. Over the next few months, Elijah became a mentor to Ava, guiding her as she explored her interests in engineering and problem-solving. He told her stories about Matthew and the lessons the older man had imparted. Ava listened intently, soaking up every word. She admired Elijah, not just for his accomplishments, but for the way he believed in her. One day, while walking home from the community center, Ava noticed an older man struggling to carry a bag of groceries up a flight of stairs. Without hesitation, she ran over to help. "Thank you, young lady," the man said, smiling. "You didn't have to do that." Ava shrugged, remembering something Elijah had told her. "If someone needs help and I can do it, why wouldn't I?" The man chuckled, clearly impressed. That's a wise way to think. From that day forward, Ava began to see opportunities to help everywhere. She organized small cleanup efforts with her friends, volunteered to tutor younger children at the center, and even started a tiny lending library in her neighborhood. Each small act, though seemingly insignificant, carried the spirit of kindness that had been passed down to her. Elijah's reflection. As Elijah watched Ava grow into a young leader, he couldn't help but reflect on his own journey. He often found himself thinking about the moment on the roadside when he had helped Matthew all those years ago. At the time, it had felt like a simple act, a boy helping a stranger. But now, standing in the community center he had built, surrounded by young minds like Ava's, Elijah understood that kindness was never simple. Every small gesture, every act of goodwill, had the potential to create ripples far beyond what anyone could predict. His own life had been transformed because of the way Matthew had chosen to carry forward the kindness he'd received. And now, through Ava and countless others, that same legacy was taking on a life of its own. A new dream. When Ava turned 16, she was selected to present her first major project at a state science fair. With Elijah's guidance, she had designed a prototype for a low-cost solar panel system that could be easily assembled and installed in rural homes. Her goal was to provide a sustainable energy solution for families like her own, who often struggled with high utility bills. On the day of the fair, Elijah accompanied Ava to the event, standing proudly in the audience as she presented her idea. Her passion and confidence shone through, earning her not only a first-place prize, but also the attention of a panel of investors eager to support her vision. That evening, as they drove back to Harlan, Ava turned to Elijah, her eyes alight with excitement. "Do you think Mr. Evans would have been proud?" she asked. Elijah smiled, his voice filled with emotion. I know he would be. But more importantly, I think he'd remind you that this is just the beginning. The everlasting ripple. Ava's solar panel project became more than just a science fair entry. With the support of investors and the mentorship of Elijah, she launched a nonprofit organization dedicated to bringing sustainable energy solutions to underserved communities. The organization, aptly named Bright Futures, grew rapidly, impacting thousands of lives across the country. And yet, Ava never forgot where it all began. She continued to volunteer at the Harlan Community Center, mentoring younger children just as Elijah had mentored her. She often shared the story of Matthew Evans and the flat tire that had set everything in motion. Kindness is like a chain reaction, she told them. One act can change someone's life, and that person can change the lives of so many others. A legacy without end. As the years rolled on, the story of Matthew Evans, Elijah, and now Ava became a part of Harlan's fabric, a tale passed down from generation to generation. It wasn't just a story about generosity. It was a reminder that anyone, no matter their circumstances, could be a force for good in the world. In a quiet corner of the Harlan Community Center, a mural was painted to honor the legacy of kindness. It depicted Matthew's silver Mercedes on the side of a dusty road, Elijah kneeling to fix the tire, and a vibrant tree growing in the background, its branches stretching wide and bearing fruit. Beneath the mural, a simple inscription read, "From one act of kindness, a forest can grow." And so the ripple continued, carried forward by the hands and hearts of the next generation, proving that kindness, once set in motion, has no end. The power of one act. The story of Matthew Evans, Elijah, and Ava came to symbolize a profound truth, that even the smallest act of kindness can transform not just a moment, but an entire world. What began with a flat tire on a dusty road had grown into something far greater than anyone could have imagined, a legacy of giving that spanned generations. Elijah, now in his 40s, continued to lead the community center in Harlan, expanding its reach to neighboring towns and inspiring countless young minds to dream beyond their circumstances. Ava, in her 20s, had taken Bright Futures to a global stage, providing sustainable energy solutions to communities around the world. She often credited Elijah and Matthew as the roots of her inspiration, weaving their story into the mission of her organization. The people of Harlan, once a struggling town, now thrived as a close-knit community known for its resilience and generosity. Matthew's name was spoken not with reverence for his wealth, but with gratitude for his heart, a man who had rediscovered what it truly meant to live a meaningful life. The lesson that lives on. The story leaves us with a simple but powerful lesson. Kindness is never wasted. Matthew could never have known that stopping to accept help from a boy on the side of the road would change the trajectory of his life. And countless others. Elijah didn't help Matthew because he expected something in return. He helped because it was the right thing to do. And Ava, inspired by their shared story, became a beacon of hope for her generation, proving that the ripple of kindness knows no bounds. For all the complexities of life, the story reminds us that some of the most profound changes come from the simplest actions: offering help, believing in someone, or choosing to give when you have the chance. These acts, no matter how small, carry the potential to grow, to inspire, and to build a legacy far beyond our own reach. A call to action. The mural in the Harlan Community Center, with its vibrant tree and the inscription beneath it, serves as a reminder to everyone who sees it. From one act of kindness, a forest can grow. It challenges us all to look for opportunities to plant seeds of our own, whether through a helping hand, an encouraging word, or an act of generosity. It shows that we don't need extraordinary resources or influence to make a difference. Sometimes, all it takes is the willingness to stop, notice, and care. The ripple continues, carried forward by those who choose to act. And in that, the legacy of Matthew, Elijah, and Ava lives on, not as a story bound to Harlan, but as a universal truth. The power to change the world starts with one act of kindness. The rest, as this story proves, will take care of itself. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.